Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 10, Episode 10 of The Blacklist. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So I thought it was so interesting when we kind of had, we had the cold opening, but when we got into the episode, we had Red hanging out with Agnes, who is playing Among Us, which I'm like, yeah, it's so interesting to be playing that game around Reddington. Who's played probably like a 30-year game of kind of Among Us in some regards. Either way, and you could tell by like Cooper's expression, I'm like, right, you still haven't fully settled everything. It's like, you're not going to keep Reddington from being around Agnes, because, hey, she likes hanging around Pinky. So, and obviously it's like, you know how much that means to Red. You had your, you still have your boundaries and stuff like that. But I was like, you could tell things weren't super copacetic. And I love that Cooper's just bringing up the fact of the matter is how do you think this is going to go? Yeah, they might not have been great people. Once again, we're not going to even see us as a leader, or I'm going to shed a tear from some bad guys. But it's still a thing of, you set up all of this, Main Justice invested a lot of time and effort into going after Wu Jing, and you just murder him, and it's like questions are going to be asked, and Red's talking, and I love Red's response because Red seems so cavalier about it, where it's just, it's also because Red's very matter of fact about it. It's it is what it is, because it's our dynamic. There's never been a fully defined way on how this whole task force situation is, where our dynamic has worked. It is different from our first time, the first day versus the second day versus the 10th day. Our situation today is going to be different from our situation tomorrow. It's always, we kind of go with the ebb and flow. We figure things out along the way. And yeah, I sometimes have my conniving ways on how I kind of manipulate you guys into doing stuff that I want you to do. Obviously, Red didn't go into that, but it's still that thing of, you kind of got what you wanted in the end. You deleted files from off of the FBI servers and stuff like that. So it's but as Red would put that, it's I didn't delete them, just kind of moved them so they're not there, deleted them off that, but they're with me or something like that. But maybe they are just straight up deleted. My impression of last episode was no, I've just moved them and I have them, but they're not on an FBI server to be able to, for someone to pull a Wu Jing and eventually tap into and find out about my circumstances, my deal and my immunity agreement and all that. Either way, Red's trying to extend that olive branch by hey, maybe we could work together. And if you feel hey, this is where our dynamic and relationship ends here, I totally understand. And it is very poetic that he would give Cooper and the task force the particular assignment that they got this episode, because it ties into Cooper, and it, especially with the overarching thing being hey, all you can do is make the best judgment you can based on the information you have at the time. So, yeah, you might learn something in retrospect, but all you can do is, once again, we do good work together, and if that is a relationship you're willing to continue, then I'm willing to continue it as well, so. Obviously, the rest of the team had their it's interesting because Sia and Wrestler are the ones who really say anything. Dembe doesn't, because I guess it's also Dembe knows how Reddington operates, and it's is it too surprising? No, in the art of war, it's what Red is willing to do and what Red will do. It's I guess it's you've known him the longest of anyone there, so you are in this interesting spot where you have you have your perspective of, because they've worked alongside Red, but no one's ever worked alongside Red the way Dembe has. Dembe was his right-hand man for so many years. And yes, the task force has been by his side for so many years, but it's just a different dynamic. So I just think that kind of plays into right, Dembe just has a very different perspective. He agrees with the team, yeah, it's super jacked up what Red did, but it's also yeah, I know Red. Red lies and manipulates, but this is kind of quite the wool over our eyes type of situation, more so than any others, I think, in their eyes, because not a lot of his manipulations come back with their floors being stained with blood and 2 dead bodies, and it's kind of yeah, the whole thing kind of blew up in our face aside, because what was the whole point of it? Because Wu Jing is dead, his right-hand guy is dead, Bo Chang's in the wind, so I guess the troll farmer, he's just out there. So it does make you wonder what happened with Bo. I guess he's still on retainer for Red, but he's just out there doing his thing, I guess. Priscilla's, it's well, we know Wu Jing had her killed. We still don't know about the freelancer. He's potentially still out there in the wind if he hadn't already been killed by Wu Jing, just like Perillos was. But either way, this particular case involves a guy known as the Postman, who can get people whatever they need in prison, which is kind of a wild, and obviously it's like an extreme example of it, but it's also like very true of just like what people are able to get into prisons, and obviously utilizing something that is a real world thing of like the advancements in technology where criminals are using drones to get stuff in prison. It's not like, oh man, that's like completely made up. It's like, no, apparently that's actually true to life to some extent. Not even just to some extent. I think it is a thing, but like, I think they do have measures in place to stop that. But obviously the Postman was able to get around that because he has a very like man-made drone, just kind of a really good piece of engineering of like being able to make a very quiet one that doesn't really get detected. So, but yeah, the Postman's able to get you whatever you need. Our cold opening was the guy that was the head of a gang literally having a gun brought to him in prison. It's like, wow, you there's a lot of stuff you can get in prisons, like drugs, a phone, this or that. It's like being able to go as far as getting a gun, that's wild. And then later on we find out it's like, oh cool, giving a chemist the chemicals he needs to build something. And we thought the chemist was going to do something inside a prison. It's like, no, we ultimately end up, jumping ahead a little bit. We end up finding out that the Postman needed him to build something for him. Because how this all relates to Cooper is because Lawrence, God, I'm blanking on his last name, but they just call him Larry. Larry, the Postman. It feels so weird to say that because it's almost like saying like Larry the Cable Guy. So the Postman, we'll just call him that. Just is more intimidating. Cooper was on his trial 30 years ago because he was on trial for killing his manager. And everyone kind of, because of the evidence stacked against him, everyone was saying he was guilty except for Cooper. Cooper's like, yeah, but certain things just don't line up. His alibi, can we really 100% trust his girlfriend? Like, she just made this testimony like 24 hours after the murder. So it's like, it's just that certain things in the case didn't line up with Cooper. But we know, like, right, it obviously didn't go well because we find out, like, yes, he went to prison at 18 for 25 years, got out 5 years ago for good behavior, and just kind of disappeared off the map. And this whole situation has Cooper reflecting on the case back then and also trying to figure out what the Postman is up to now, because ultimately, like I said, he was gathering materials, and it was so interesting how they ultimately ended up figuring out, like, hey, they followed, like, the money that gang leader, like, paid to get the gun. They followed that, and were able to kind of find a person that, like, the middle person who gathers the materials for the Postman. It was a woman named Gina who was like, yeah, we get paid not to ask, like, questions and stuff like that, because they started in, like, the more, like, fake bag type of thing, like side of business, and then like met the Postman and ended up kind of like flowing in other directions. But it's like, yeah, whatever you need, I got. But now we're leaning more on the scientific side of things. And it seemed like ultimately Herbie was able to find out that he was gathering materials for, what was it? Was it Arbrin or something like that? Abrin? And it's supposed to be like ricin, but like even more potent, which just feels like, I'm like, does ricin even have, is there even, I guess, because the way Herbie was making it sound like, I mean, maybe ricin does have it. Like, I guess if you can, like, catch it early enough, and if it's, the dose is small enough, maybe. I've always just thought, because I've watched enough stuff where that's kind of been utilized, because it was utilized in Breaking Bad, wasn't it, if I remember correctly. I want to say that might have been like the first thing I ever saw that utilized that poison, ricin. And that might be the first thing I ever watched it, like, reference that. Either way, tangents and all that aside, but this Aberrin is, like, even more deadly, and he's trying to make an oxidized version of it, so. But the thing was, considering, like, obviously we're cutting back and forth between, like, his, like, not even his case, only, like, the jury side of things while they're deliberating, but considering, like, we know his case didn't go the way he wanted it to, that he ended up getting sent to prison, which that's a whole interesting thing in itself, because the warden at one of the prisons he's got transferred, because he was at like a federal prison beforehand, but then he got transferred over to another prison. This is where he was with him and the chemist were cellmates. But the warden was like, yeah, I kind of have to think that he's guilty, and Cooper was like, why? He's like, Well, because if not, I have to live with I think about the fact is that might have sent a guy away for 25 years for something he didn't do. So you kind of have to be like, nah, I really do hope, and I have to kind of have to believe that he did do it, because if not, the alternative sucks. And you see a lot of some of that comes up because Cooper, it never sat right with Cooper, because back then he was pushing the, being like, right, are we absolutely sure? I don't want to ruin a guy's life just because you want to go home. But it's like, once again, all the evidence says this, but it's like, yes, but reasonable doubt. And the jury former, she is someone that has like military experience. She worked at, a particular fort, and this is like a year after. Maybe, I think he said a year, but it was pretty not too long after Cooper had left the service, and so she recognized it in his eyes, like, right, you want to save this person because because it's like. Because one of the jurors was like, oh, I've known guys like him, but it's like, yeah, but you can't just associate this guy with people you went into high school with. You're bringing your own bias into this. But I guess you can make the argument Cooper was too, like his attempt to like, I don't want to just send some kid off to prison. I want to, you want to save him, but she's also like, right, but we also got to think about her. And he was like, who? It's like the victim. We got to get justice for her. And it's like, right, all you can do is take the information that's in front of you, what you have access to, and make the best decision you can. So it is 100% of a thing of, he can't deny the evidence being what it is, and so he ultimately kind of, and it's like, I don't know if it's a situation of what she said made him like feel like he has to cave, because it's like, am I on the wrong side of this? Because the best we can do is send him to prison, because at the end of the day, that is what the evidence presents it, as. So I did like, I skipped over a piece of the puzzle, but I did like when Reddington went to visit the bank guy or whatever, and it's like, oh, I know all this stuff about you. I'm Raymond Reddington. The guy's like, oh. And he's like, okay. It's like, how was your day or whatever? The guy's like, yeah, it was fine until you like stepped in. I enjoy staying, because why is no one else here? He's like, I enjoy the peace and quiet. It's like, well, your wife, oh, that's great. You're also having to live with your mother-in-law, but it's like, oh, here's this really good assisted living home that I can help send your mother-in-law Laurel to. Oh, it's a great place. Obviously, it's very expensive. I know you've probably looked into it, but I know the guy Rick who runs the place, because actually, like, he owes me a favor, because like years ago in Dubai, we were there. He lost like a lot, like kind of lost everything. I spotted him some money, so I can get you in a position where you can get Laurel sent to this place at a very, very reduced price. It's like, do you get where I'm going? And the guy was like, Laurel's going to Dubai? And Red's like, oh my god, pulls out the gun, and it's like, I like, he's like, kind of like, there's a limit to friendship, and I guess he's just like, all right, being friends with you isn't really worth it. It's, it doesn't benefit me that much, so I'm just gonna threaten you. Give me the information I need, or I'm gonna put a bullet in your kneecap. I get it. The guy got so wrapped up in Red's story that he conflated, and he's like, what are you saying? Like, it's like, no, you missed a point. The Dubai part is like why Rick owes Reddington a favor, because Reddington spotted him some money. It's like, not that your mother-in-law is going to Dubai. It's about her going. I love that the guy got the story so jumbled that he's like, wait, Laurel's going to Dubai? I love that. Also, I do love that this is, because I referenced it before, but, this is Herbie's first official day on the job. So I love that he like literally had to like video call in at first. They're like, really? And it's like, yeah, Sis kind of got this bug, and, it's coming out one end and it's not good. But I do love that, Cooper was like, oh, gave him a suggestion, which does seem like it helped. So, but I do love that, Herbie really liking the engineering side of things, and he's like, oh man, like when they go disassemble that bomb device, I'd love to kind of see like the engineering aspect of it. It's like, well, at the very least, they'll let you keep one of those drones. And Herbie's like, wait, really? And Dibby turns to him and was like, in the most deadpan way, no. I was like, I love it. You're such a dick for that. It's like, hey, the first day on the job, gotta get a little hazing in. So I love it. But nevertheless, circling back to things, what this is all about is he was trying to get, the postman was trying to get revenge against the guy who was the prosecutor back then. Because it turns out after looking through the evidence, the postman's girlfriend at the time, she lied on the stand about like, oh, he confessed to me and stuff like that. But it's like nothing like that had come up. She just came up with that out of nowhere, because even Harold was making a point all those years ago. She was already at the station for something else. And even I was like, yeah, that seems significant. She was already at the station before the murder happened. And then all of a sudden, like, he was kind of implying like she was at the station already for something else. And then also brought up we found out that she was already getting in trouble for some drugs. So the prosecutor at the time kind of forced her hand, because her initial testimony had nothing, like what she was being in to talk about, had nothing to do with the postman at all. But it's like later on, like, because that was something that was like the prosecutor hid from the, because there was something that was in the trial that the judge made them strike and couldn't be considered as evidence, which is a complicated thing where it's like, oh, there's a piece of evidence, but you're not supposed to, like, it's not admissible. So that's always that interesting thing in court where it's like, right, there's a piece of the puzzle that's there, but you're not supposed to acknowledge it because the judge felt like it wasn't. But once again, there could be multiple reasons why something isn't admissible. Maybe it wasn't like given to like one side, like the defense or the prosecutor ahead of time, so it can't be submitted last minute. Or maybe it's just something that was like born from the poisonous tree, so the evidence doesn't count, like type of situation. There's just so many factors on why something might not be admissible in court, or it has to be struck from like the record, or even the jury has to like dismiss like even thinking or bringing something up. It's just one of those things. It might have been related to the girlfriend at the time. I don't remember what that specific thing, or was it something else entirely. But either way, the prosecutor screwed over the postman back then, because he had ambitions and he was trying to show that he was making a dent in crime. So the postman just happened to be like, sadly, a sacrificial lamb. But he orchestrated that situation and made him take the fall for a crime he didn't commit. Because also sucks, because that means like her real killer still was out there for the next 25 years. For 30 years that killer was never caught. So, but ultimately, the postman was planning on shipping himself to like, because this guy is currently like the attorney general in like Maryland. And he was planning to get shipped to the guy's office and like use this like Abrin to like kill him or whatever. But with Reddington's help, calling in a favor, they ended up grabbing him up and bringing him to the task force, and he was arrested. And Harold brings up the fact this of like, hey, I'm gonna get this expunged from your record because it turns out you were innocent. Your girlfriend's hand was forced, so like she was kind of persuaded by the prosecutor to lie because like it's going to use her drug charges against. It's like, right, we'll drop those if you do this for me. So, and even saying like, right, this is going to be expunged from your record. I'm going to try and get that, and I'm trying to get the attorney general like him to pay for what he did back then, And even like the postman was like, that doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, it's like it can't give him back those 25 years. So he's like, why even do that? It won't matter. And it's like, it does matter, because it's like, right, the record should represent and show that you went to prison for something you didn't do. And that's the sad thing of like, he did have a bright future, and it's just sad that he turned to this life of crime, because it's like that thing of like, right, I went away for something I didn't do, and who I could have been versus who I became because of my circumstances. It's kind of a sad story, because obviously we know not everyone in prison obviously like is innocent, but there are people who are innocent that sit up for so many years that can never get those years back. There's even people who obviously end up on death row. So it's just kind of sad how things work. Perfect world, perfect society, stuff like that would never happen, but it's not a perfect world and it's not a perfect society, So it's like, yeah, you have to pay for the crimes that you committed now, but at the very least, this crime. But it's also sad because it's like at the end of the day, like you becoming who you became was a byproduct of you, an innocent person, being put in jail and stuff like that, and just not wanting to get revenge. I guess he figured, like, I don't know if he knew that the prosecutor had it out for him, or maybe it's just kind of like a, you're the person that ruined my life. So it was just a long laid plan of trying to get that. Maybe he just built up his network to be where it was, and then it's like, this is fine. Because once again, he waited like 5 years to strike. Because I guess he didn't become the postman until like those 5 years after he got out of, like, that, in that 5 year period he had disappeared. That's when he became the postman. So that was also a thing for Red. It's like, this guy's already, so that also plays into it too, because Red's like, yeah, this guy's been building up a network and just doing his thing for the past 5 years. I mean, on a more domestic front, the last thing I want is this guy going international. I guess that could kind of cut into your margins of what you do a little bit for people. So, but it's also like, once again, Red made it clear about the people he includes on the blacklist. So I think that's kind of indicative in some regards, maybe. But also, it's like, Red also picked this one because, once again, it's connection to Cooper. So I do love the ending with Herbie, where he wants to invite everyone out for foosball. He's like, oh, we can hang out and stuff like that. And then Sia and Wrestler make excuses, but Wrestler ends up having something, so maybe it is real. But the fact is, like, oh, now all of a sudden Sia's like, oh yeah, I got laundry to do, and Dembe's like, I'll go along. I like soccer, and so why not something on, like, you know, soccer on the table variety. And he's like, exactly. And it's like, it's getting more popular here in the States and stuff. So I love that. That's actually, because obviously Dembe's has had a long enough connection with Herbie to know who he is. So it's like, hang out with you, Herbie. We're fully like more officially co-workers in this capacity. So let's hang out together. So, but I also love that there's the situation with Reddington wanting Agnes to have, like, basically to make her better at the online games that she is. Like, they kind of make her more strategic, and, you know, it's like, so that her friend Madison doesn't end up, like, stabbing her in the back in, like, the game like she did beforehand. It's like, oh, make you a better, like, player at the game, like teaching her chess, which I love that Cooper's like, oh yeah, like, it's not, like, you know, Red's always saying, like, Pinky's, like, 7 steps ahead or whatever, but at the end of the day, you never fully know what Pinky is thinking or whatever, and you won't always have the information that you need at the time, but it will make you a better player in the long run. So, you know, it's like, it's a little indicative of their relationship, where it's like, yeah, might not always be the most copacetic relationship, but at the same time, it is, and made us, the task force, better because of it, you know. So it's like, you're learning from one of the best type of situations. So I thought that was pretty dope. But we also had the wrestler side of things. Obviously, we're peeking in a little bit here and there into his role as a sponsor. And the person he's sponsoring is doing good, but it's like, hey, let's meet up again. You know, it's like, he's kind of returning to the world of the living. He looks good, you know, kind of, it's like, oh, handsome. Which even Wrestler was like, yeah, even by the point where I was in recovery, I hadn't even shaved yet, you know. So it's like, right, you're probably a little better off than I am. So when it's all said and done, they do meet up at the end of the episode, and life had kind of, you know, things were kind of rough, because for him, it's like, you know what you're dealing with, and I don't know if everyone around him, in that guy's particular circumstances, whether everyone actually knows, but he's like, it feels like everyone's it feels like everyone's looking at you, just waiting for you to mess up and fail. And also, it didn't help, his dealer ended up calling him. He had blocked his dealer's number, but his dealer got a new phone, and he bought some pills, and Wrestler gets rid of them. It was like $400. He's like, well, save your money, because if you keep buying them and you bring them to me, I will get rid of them. They will just get flushed. So, right, well, I'm going to stay right here with you. Neither one of us is going anywhere until it's time for the meeting. So kind of like, right, kind of that tough love, which is necessary in this situation. So I thought that was just kind of nice peeking in. Like, it feels like they're kind of like showing that thread, because I don't know whether that's supposed to tie into maybe what Wrestler's going to be when this series comes to an end, or whether that B plot is going to develop into something much bigger later on. It feels like that might be the case, but we'll ultimately have to wait and see. Because I was kind of nervous when that storyline was initially introduced, because I was like, could that be connected to Wu Jing? But it's like, no, all that's kind of on the, like, all that's been dealt with. So now that, once again, now that that storyline's over, what's next in the long run? What has Red already planned his contingency to kind of, like, as the series is coming to an end, like, he's kind of come up with his plan, with his how this will all play out? Or, you know, it's going to be interesting to see. Like I said, I brought up last episode what the back half of this season is going to be like. What's the overarching story going to be? And we'll ultimately have to wait and see. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.